Morning, everyone. I'm Tisiso Musi. This is Peter Groenewald and Katlego Lebete. This is Perception. I'm sure you guys know us by now. And today we're going to be talking about, what are we talking about today? We're talking about demographics in architecture. And what are your thoughts on that? Already, just to start it now, let's just start with what is demographics. Demographics is the statistical study, or should I say information or data about the population, as well as who stays where, how many people work, all those relating to just the population in general, right? So that's demographics. And when we say in architecture, we're now looking at the influence that demographics has in architecture itself. So meaning all those different categories that we mentioned, do they play a role in what we do? And
well, we've spoke about this at length in private conversation, but like South Africa's demographic on architecture, we have 11,000 registered professionals. Most of them are white men, because that's still a holdover from the apartheid era, where it made it difficult to study for everybody else. That takes usually about 3 or 4 generations, if everything goes well, to change. And obviously everything has not gone well. But you know a bit more of the statistics.
Because you mentioned it before. I remember we had one of the first few episodes, you mentioned that issue when you were talking about what is architecture and stuff like that, and you were mentioning that there's lack of enough black women within the field of architecture.
Well, look, I remember having a presentation, receiving a presentation from Linda Mvusi, who was one of the first black female architects in South Africa. Now, things have evolved since then, and she had to study in the UK because of the systems in South Africa sort of making it almost impossible for her. We'll have to confirm with her, right? Yes, right. But right now, as of 2024, or rather, let's say October 2023, Statistics SA has issued the stats regarding black female architects practicing in South Africa and registered as 111.
111?
Yes.
Out of 11,000.
What?
So with your black female draftspersons, technologist and senior architectural technologist being an upside down pyramid in terms of the numbers. Now, yeah, I would think that it's progress. However, in a country where it's 61 million people, 80% of which
64 now.
64 million,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But either way, 80 to 90% of the population is black, right?
Yeah.
Then you understand the disparity in terms of our ability to design for the majority of the population with...
Well, let's just first start. Let's not say 89% is black, because the issue with the demographics in architecture is it's majority white. So we rather say non-white, because that is the focus of the area that needs to be improved, because it's also Indian that's not represented, or color that's not represented, or other Asian cultures that's not represented. So making the statistic just on black, even though it's 80%, I feel everything needs to improve below the line of white professionals. And again, I think we've had discussions where the best way to improve is at grassroots.
Yes.
But in architecture, I think the threshold comes to studies. How many do you get accepted at a university in the architectural field? Because it's not easy getting in.
Well, I look at it's easy getting in than graduating. Graduating is almost impossible for certain demographical divisions, I look at it and I'm thinking, okay, if I'm living in, say, South Africa, coming from a middle-class family, from a hood which is probably 30 k's outside of Pretoria, which is where a huge chunk of the black population live, getting to the university which has the facilities to develop me in the architectural field is a nightmare.
And that's issue number one.
Yes. And then from there, it's the budget of the studies.
And that's not including just the fees. That's actually including what you need to spend money on throughout the studies.
Yeah, well, let's start. TUT is quite cheap when it comes to institutional fees. Quite cheap. And still, as a student, I can't see making that a year to study.
Yeah.
As a student. So that's number one. So a person's benefactors, like their parents or their school or their bursary, needs to fund that person. The NFAS is a struggle to get money out of on a good day.
Nowadays is even worse.
Yes, so that's not reliable. So you need other benefactors. Getting a loan, that is difficult for, again, non-white. Especially your parents have to have an exceptional background for the bank to give a student loan. I myself never had a student loan. I was privileged enough that my dad made enough money to pay my fees yearly out of his salary. He worked his ass off so that I can benefit from it. So I was privileged in that way. And I know a lot of people who got student debt, with R500,000 worth of student debt. Is that worth it? It's not a lot, but is that worth it?
It's not worth it.
Is it? Then you said where the non-white population, it's difficult to get a high-paying job where you don't slave away just paying your debt, where paying a debt becomes easy. That is difficult enough. And then we sit with the economic conditions where it's difficult to find proper work as well. What's the youth unemployment? 50%?
It's increasing. Yes.
So we've just shown two basic issues to stop the demographic growing for the professional architects in South Africa. That's nevertheless getting a computer, a strong computer.
By strong, we mean a minimum of 40K.
Yeah, and no, that's maximum. A minimum of 20K, because 20K you can get like a
desktop.
A desktop or entry-level laptop.
But here's the thing, it's not going to last you through your career if you want to start a business. This is just you trying to get by your studies.
Just by your studies. But I think we should also just step back on this sense, because when we say the demographics in architecture, we're not just talking about architecture students as well as architecture individuals, right? But the facts that you have mentioned are very important, because the demographic itself needs people similar to them to address their issues, because they relate, right? So now what you guys are saying affects the demographic as a whole. That, okay, right now you find a person, a public individual who has nothing to do with architecture, needing services of a good architect, right, but not affording it, and then resulting in hiring someone who says they just draw plans, right, and that's someone who's not even qualified, right? And now it goes back to the thing that, where are the architects that are supposed to be spread out to create the competition to allow this client to find someone who suits them?
Well, here's the thing about being an architect, right? The aim is for you to understand the built environment and human beings to a point where you can actually design a solution which is adaptable at various stratas, right? Typical example, there is Moremi Moela, who I worked in partnership with AfriSam to come up with a sort of assembly system for some of the AfriSam products in a typology that is adaptable in the hood. And this AfriSam is a concrete manufacturer, a cement manufacturing company. So that is a solution that you buy the plans off plan, and then from there AfriSam produces the assembly, the panel system, and then you transport to site, and it's still extendable. It's not restrictive in terms of what you can do at site. You have a short-term plan, and you can have a medium and long-term plan in terms of the assembly of the system. Now that's a solution which he came up with, inspired by the need, wanting to meet the need, now being able to link the systems in terms of the products which are possible,
and then finding a way to connect. So
yes.
Now, in relation to that, as from the statement I just made, we need more of those people. It's not a thing that they don't exist. They exist, right? But now it goes back to what you said on the teaching them from a young age, right? So one of the things that I 100% know is that architecture, where, because like I said, I'm from a very nice village deep down in Mafikeng, right? Not deep, but there, good enough. And me saying I'm gonna study architecture was the biggest phenomenon that happened to my mother. Like, what the hell is architecture, right? And then she only realized when she started seeing my studies that, oh, he's drawing plans. I'm like, even my mother thinks I'm just drawing plans, right? So they don't understand the association of our career to what they just see a need for a house and they need someone to build them a house. Right?
Yes, but now you have to understand that. So someone that lives in the village knows how everything works. And you that come out of that village automatically knows how the household works and how to design that. As an architect, you're trained to look at other households. Now, your mother thinks you're just drawing plans, but what your mother automatically, instinctively knows is the kitchen will come here, the toilet will be outside, this will be there. Where for me, coming to that village to try and design, not knowing how it works is going to be incredibly difficult. Where if you come out of the situation, out of that demograph, you instinctively know how things will work. So someone from the same demographic will like, yeah, but it's obvious. But it's not. And in architecture, we are trained to start thinking of that. Because now that you know something obvious, you're now trained to critically think of that. You know how to improve it. There will be improvement on the life, not just, oh, it's better that way, but nobody uses it. It's the competition we talked about, the Now competition of Khayelitsha. Somebody like me, I'm not going to take part of it because I have no idea how that streetscape interacts and works. And for South Africa to expand their demograph, for that space to change for the people in a good way, we need people from that demograph to come into architecture and design it and improve it. So that is, I would say, the most important aspect of expanding the demographic as big as possible, is to alleviate the poorer regions in South Africa.
So now it goes back to exactly that, how we started this conversation, having more professionals from these regions, which you mentioned that they sometimes, or we sometimes struggle with actually funding and going through the studies or maybe understanding it. But in order to answer the thing you just said now, what you just put on the table now, we need those people because now they understand exactly what to do. As if I'm from Mafikeng and I come here and I grew up my whole life there, and I come here, I learn about, good infrastructure, I learn about building an economy, I learn about how architecture impacts an economy, I learn all these things, and I go back home to a place whereby there is no such thing as an economy. It's just, everything is a mess, and you realize, okay, there's things that we can implement, right? That goes back again to what you said. Now there's a person who's from that route, because then I wouldn't go to Khayelitsha and say, here's a solution. I'm not from there. I don't understand it. I'll take some time to study it and have to understand it, right? So now it's that, okay, we need to improve so that the demographic can answer this. Now it goes to the second or third stage of the conversation where we say, all right, but now what are the best solutions in this case, right? And how do we affect, because demographic is always increasing. Right now, what is the anticipating that by 2050 or something, there will be around 11 billion people on Earth, right? And already
that's the end of the century.
End of the century. Yeah, 11 billion people. So now imagine you say there's 11 billion people, and already people are struggling with space. They don't know where to buy plots. They don't know how to do this. Now there's places where I think we'll have to attach a link of some of the research we have done here, where they were talking about, I know these mid-range apartments where they have 4 floors, right? And then they have a community around it and everything associated. This guy was saying, I think it was Vitral something, Vitral. And he was saying that if we have Italy, as it is, and it has just those accommodations, it will literally fit 11 billion people, right? So the question is, how are we building now in order to...
But now we're getting back to the demographics. If you build that low rise in your village, are people going to stay in it, or are they rather going to stay their own little house
with a garden space where they?
Well, that's a very good question. They wouldn't, right? So, but there's a lot of land. The reason I mentioned Italy, or is it Italy? The reason I mentioned Italy is because Italy is very small, right? very, very small. So now when we go to a larger scape and we say, okay, Italy doesn't cover even 0.1% of Earth, right? It's 0 point something. So now in this case, we say, okay, we can spread out these things, meaning people can still have their own personal space. But when it comes to other places where it can be condensed, better planning has to be put in. Like if, especially in cities, like if we go back to Mafikeng, let's say we decide, or they decide to put in some money into the economy and see that it grows, right? And now more people start coming in. People are gonna feel, people already there are gonna feel like there's becoming crowded, like where do we go, where is this, and stuff like that. But with proper planning and understanding that, okay, some of these individuals are not permanently here, and if they're permanently here, they can stay in these types of...
Okay, let's say we are talking about Brazilian architecture, right? We know Brazil is one of the best in terms of your soccer, right? And however, you're having a lot of the city and urban scapes being quite condensed. Now, you know that there's a culture of soccer because of the demographical exposure to soccer. That is their game. And there's confinement of space. Now, in their design, they are placing their residences under the soccer, the five-a-side soccer pitches, because the culture of the people has to still thrive, but they need space, right? In South Africa, five-a-side soccer is not so popular yet. However, we are, because of our ability to still sprawl, we've got a lot of space. You're having a lot of people now still favoring your typical full pitch soccer, you know, and with natural grass and so on and so forth. So you understand that the culture of the place has a tendency of manifesting itself in the architecture. However, we as architects also know that because of our ability to psychologically impress certain ideologies in a mind, we are able to take the design and influence the culture. Yes. Right.
Or we can take the culture and influence the architect.
Let's go to communism. If you look at the communist blocks, where the architecture heavily influenced the ideology of people, where the first apartments they built in Stalin's era was depressing as hell. People killed themselves. We have spoken about this. It was too plain, too boring. When the later leaders changed it to make it a bit more special, and a bit more unique, a bit more highlights here and there, and that influenced the culture in a much more positive way. And that was a ideologically driven architectural change that happened. And you can implement that idea into, let's say, architecture in South Africa. If we go, let's say, I think the best thing to do in South Africa is to stop urban sprawl. Not suburbia, but urban sprawl. So you still get your villages that spread out as needed. But if we densify our urban sprawl, we get people to live a little bit closer together. That means we will get a little bit more tolerance at the end of the day, which is good in the urban sprawl. And villages is going to stay much more unique to the area. And that can be something we can legislate for demographics, because the way we're going to legislate that here in Pretoria is going to be different than Johannesburg, it's going to be different in Cape Town.
Because the development is different, the interests in what they're doing it for is different. Joburg is more of a business and economics.
And it's faster paced.
It's faster paced, and in Pretoria it's also a bit fast paced, but it's calmer, it's more residential in both. You go to a rural area, then it's literally just residential, it's home. They don't work there, it's home. So yeah, it will be...
Okay. So now that we've kind of had a broad discussion on the demographics, how can we improve the demographic of the architectural profession in South Africa?
Well, there's a guy who was talking to Dedi Kuselo who was saying that in as much as we have universities which are mostly placed in your highly densified and urbanized areas, now, in terms of the evolution of higher education in South Africa, there needs to be the flexibility to now go to where the people are rather than the people having to come where the education is. That's his idea, right? And I think he's onto something. However, it becomes a bit tricky in terms of the reliability and safety of infrastructure, where you are deploying the education to, because now you're speaking about the stability of your internet. If you're going to have a satellite station there, there's also the electricity problem in South Africa, which is a bane of our existence at the moment. And then from there, there's just the being able to seamlessly work with each other, even though the other areas are remote. That can work, provided there's a development in terms of technology which is much more accelerated and much more stable. However, then in terms of our education system, from primary school, actually preschool, right through to high school, there needs to be the ability, we need to have the ability to transplant that knowledge at a basic level so that you can start whetting people's appetites regarding architecture and demographics, and how people who are living in the built environment can influence the built environment in a direction that makes cultural sense.
And that, I think, just to add on top of that, it goes back to economy, because economy is very important in this sense, because it will dictate how architecture will grow, right? So meaning if there's a falling economy and it's subsiding, there's not going to be any good developments. There's not enough money for that, and there's not anyone with any intention to do anything good because they don't have the money for it. They need to make money. But in the case of a growing economy, we can say that people are now free to explore and say, this is what we can probably do, this is what we can look at and stuff like that. So in this case, I think, just talking about the demographics, I think South Africa is going, it looks bad. Politics, it looks bad, but there is growth, right? There is actual growth, and it doesn't look like it's there until you actually really pay attention and realize that there's a lot of young, educated people right now, right? Compared to how it was 5 years ago, compared to how it was 10 years ago, compared to how it was 15 years ago. Even though there's still issues of job and employment and stuff like that, but there's so much potential for the economy to grow because there's people who are knowledgeable in having it grow. Now the question is, how are architects going to grow along with them to address the new needs, right? Because right now people who are unemployed are probably staying with their parents, right? Or the home, or the hustling, something like that, either way. But once they kick off, which I pray to God that they do, I pray to God that you get the job you want. Once they kick off, right, now they're going to start looking at housing. They're going to start looking at where to stay, you know, all these things, and who's supposed to be there to address that issue, right? It'll be us. So yes, we're going to have to whet the appetite for the young architects coming in, but they're going to also have to understand that there's going to be a boom at some point. Right now, it's the calm before the storm. It's the, you know, it's the small transition.
You're saying
it's not calm, guys. It's not calm. But I'm saying for us, because we're mainly dealing on, because there's a lot of developments on public, what is this? I think you do majority of those, like apartments and stuff like
Office
that.
to apartment conversions.
Office to apartments conversions. There's medical, because Cyril Ramaphosa mentioned it on the, what is this? State of the Nation address.
Yeah, but let's not get too much into those
No, I'm not going
politics.
into detail with it. I'm just saying he mentioned the medical part, and I know it's 100% true that they're doing a lot of developments when it comes to the medical sector. It's slow, but it's there.
There's a reason the medical sector develops slow. There's a reason for that, but yeah.
So now it's like there is things that if you really pay attention to, the people are there, right? So you get to these facilities and you realize that this is not a facility that a new person would use. You as an architect that's new also in that field, you understand that. That means you understand the demographic of your time. So meaning you understand what needs to be done in order to accommodate all these other service providers, because you're also a service provider, right? So yes, technology is going to influence it, as well as, you know, education from a young age is going to influence that. And then now it just goes back to us actually producing things that coincide with all of that and say, this is what you need and we have produced it for you. Get to work, right? Because we've done our job now and we move to the next thing. So I think that's going to be a very interesting year when it comes, or a few years when it comes. For now, the transition is very rough, right? It's very rough. Architecture is already changing because people are trying to get solar panels, so structures have to change. Angles of roofs are going to change. More people or students are increasing within universities, so new buildings are being built to accommodate the students for student housing.
And students themselves have different tastes in terms of how they want to be accommodated.
Exactly. So now literally cities are changing. Kimberley, you know, because I'm also studying now. Kimberley, again, also going through the same thing with, what is this? What is that university? University of Kimberley, what is that? Soplaki, right? You start seeing that it's also changing around it. And then Stellenbosch as well, you find that there's issues with students that are staying there, and then everyone else is like, the students are loud, right? Now they're moving out and stuff. So demographics are changing and everything is just, so yeah, we just have to wait and see how South Africa changes and
Okay.
yeah.
Conclusions.
Conclusion.
Look, there is hope. We always have to keep our spirits high if you want to continue working. Like I think I've mentioned it in part of our episodes that there's an element of delusion in the study and practice of architecture, over optimism and so on and so forth. However, even though we have our heads in the sky, we do have our feet on the ground regarding what's really happening, which assists in terms of what needs to be done. There's a lot of potential in South Africa. A country does not build itself. A building cannot build itself. A brick cannot make itself. So in our application of our energy into the matter that we want to change, we need to be very aggressive to get the result that we desire to see, you know. And that is me.
I would just say keep your enthusiasm up. Make sure you understand what you want to do. Grow up and actually do it. And, you know, stay focused. And I mean on everything, architecture or whatever you decide to go into, medical, law, just keep it there because that's very important to our growth.
I personally think we should go back to a mentorship of architecture where instead of going to study, you spend a number of years under an architect training. I think that will change. Yeah, apprenticeship. I think that will boost the demographic enormously, especially with people that don't have work. They can work for as an apprenticeship free for a year, get well trained, and then start from there. And if that leads to them going to study, great. If that doesn't, they have a certain respect or a certificate showing that they have done a certain number of years under an architect, in my personal opinion. I think that's the best way we will be able to change the demographic of architectural professions in this country. I don't see it happening through universities. There's too many roadblocks for non-white demographics, just way too many. So, yeah, that's my opinion.
That's a very good opinion, yeah, because it will really help.
Okay, where can they find you?
Katlego.t at LinkedIn. At LinkedIn, yeah. And then Instagram, Katlego.t.
Yeah, Katlego.t on everything. Just search Katlego.t.
The link is below.
The link is below. You can find me at ArchiTC on Instagram, or you can write Tisetso Musi on all of social media platforms. You'll find me there.
You can find me and all my links on my website, pietergroenewald.com. It's here in front of TC. There, not in front of me. And you'll find all my social links there, all my posts, everything I'm up to at this point.